Hello, I am Tyler Finley, and this is my brief look at the American Revolution. Now, in particular, this is one of my favorite topics to study regarding history because it is the history of my nation. Let us begin, shall we? First battle of the American Revolution was at Lexington and Concord. Some prior events that led up to this was a series of taxes that Great Britain was imposing upon the American people in the 13 colonies, such as the Sugar Act, the Townshend Acts, and the Stamp Act. And these taxes were given without any rhyme or reason, and so that got the saying, no taxation without representation, started. Now, the night prior to the battles at Lexington and Concord, Paul Revere rode out into the night, telling the towns of Lexington and Concord that the British were coming, and the Minutemen, which was the militia, they were known for being ready at a moment's notice, so they were ready for the British. They were ready for the British when they arrived, and it was a standoff. And no one knows who fired the first shot, but it was known as the shot heard round the world, because at this point in history, the sun had never set on the British Empire. The sun never set. The British had many colonies and many colonies all over the world, and the sun would never set on their empire. And well, now it did. Next is the Battle of Bunker Hill. This was fought on June 17th, 1775, and the British were coming to occupy Boston and the hills surrounding Boston. Well, William Prescott had gotten word of this and started to fortify Breed's Hill, which is where the battle actually took place. So he made all these fortifications, like from the picture shown, and they were ready. And the British had to march uphill to fight these men. Well, the colonials had very little ammunition. It was scarce. And so William Prescott said, don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes, in order to conserve ammunition. The British suffered heavy losses. There were 2,200 men that attacked Bunker Hill or Breed's Hill, and 200 were killed and over 800 were wounded. So that's over 1,000 casualties. While the colonials suffered only 200 deaths from my reading. The Declaration of Independence was signed on July 4th, 1776. That is what we know as Independence Day. And what this document did was it declared the 13 colonies as an independent country from England. They were separating from England. And it was written mostly by Thomas Jefferson. Others helped in writing it, but it was largely written by Thomas Jefferson. And after it was written and drafted, all the men in the Congress signed it. And John Hancock wrote his name the largest so that King George would not have to put on his glasses to read it. The Battle of Saratoga took place on September 19th and October 7th of 1777. General Burgoyne commanded the British forces, while George Washington commanded the colonial army. And the British forces won the first battle, but had a great cost, which, when studying the American Revolution, that's a common theme, because the British believed in the honorable way of fighting, which was standing in a line and taking turns returning fire at one another, while the colonial army believed in guerrilla warfare, which was hiding behind trees and having surprise attacks on your enemy and whatnot. But on the second battle on October 7th, the Colonial Army won that battle, and it was a turning point in the war. This is where, whenever everything started to look up for the Colonial Army, and this also convinced the French to join in the conflict and help the colonials. The final battle of the American Revolution was fought at Yorktown, Virginia, and George Washington began his siege on Yorktown on September 28th, 17. It lasted until October 17th, 1781, when General Cornwallis surrendered to George Washington. And this was the last major battle of the War for Independence, because there was some fighting after this, but it was not major battles. It was just skirmishes, small skirmishes. And a fun fact, General Cornwallis himself did not surrender to George Washington. He sent an officer under him to surrender to George Washington. The Treaty of Paris was the document that officially ended the War for Independence, and it was signed in September of 1783, and it recognized the United States as an independent nation from Great Britain. And that's the end.